My name is Richard Waugh. I'm Director of Business Development with Zyka. So my job is to keep the focus on the customers here are going to share with you their experiences in e-sourcing. And I will let them introduce themselves, but I think one of the things that will be very valuable is a variety of perspectives, because we've got different businesses, different vertical markets covered here. So we've got U.S. Airways, the folks that brought you here to New Orleans. Right? Hopefully, at least many of you, not everyone, but some were brought on U.S. Airways. Hennepin County with the hospital system medical center, the folks that get you well. And Emory University, the folks that make us smarter. So I think we got a great cross-section. Let each panelist introduce themselves, and then we'll get started with some discussion topics around e-sourcing.
I'm Asif Suleiman. I'm a senior manager in corporate purchasing in U.S. Airways. I've been like more than 5 years with the company. So I started off with my financial planning and analysis, and I've been recently 2 years into purchasing.
My name is Yogi Meshwar. I'm the senior manager of strategic procurement at Hennepin County Medical Center. I've been in the supply chain business all my life, right out of college. So worked for Cardinal Health and some other big healthcare companies. And was recruited by Hennepin County about 2 years ago to actually set up a strategic procurement department, which, you know, probably no hospitals never thought of it that way before, just purchasing. So.
And I'm Lee Banner. I worked in procurement at Emory University. I've been there about 15 years. My focus really is more strategic sourcing, and we've been using the Zyka tool for about 3 years now.
Okay. Great. And so I thought for our discussion today, first of all, we want it to be very interactive. I've talked with everyone here, so I know folks aren't shy. You'll feel free to ask questions as we go. But just to set the stage, you know, I think it's always helpful to understand what was the current state within each of their businesses, and, you know, different vertical markets, different situations. But figuring out the starting point, what led to this innovation that they introduced in the area of e-sourcing. So Asif, if you could get us started just talking about, you know, what were the key business drivers and that led you to e-sourcing, and did you set specific targets in terms of cost savings or productivity or process improvement? You know, what was really driving this initiative from a top-level business perspective?
Sure. In order to give you a better understanding, probably I'll give you a little bit of history of the purchasing organization within U.S. Airways. Like 3 years back, we did a major reorganization, and we were purely tactical before it, and then we wanted to become more strategic. So as part of the whole reorg, we did hire a lot of new talent and more strategically focused people. So as part of that, we started re-looking at all the processes and all the initiative within the whole purchasing organization. Even though we did a lot of RFPs and RFQs and RFIs before, there was no standard set of process. Every step of the way was different depending on who did the whole process. So as part of that, what we wanted to do is like have an e-sourcing automated tool which would pretty much put controls over how a particular RFP is conducted. And plus, in addition to that, we actually grew from a 10-member team to 20-member team. So when it was 10 members, like you knew exactly what's going on. When it's a 20-member team, you don't know how many RFPs are going on simultaneously. So one important thing which Zyka brought was it brought more visibility as well as transparency on what's going on. People could easily share templates as well as RFPs to other people, so you could understand clearly what's going on, where it's heading towards. So that's the major thing. And always cost savings is good because airline works in a razor-thin margin, so any cost we save, it goes directly to a profit.
And just as a follow-up then, what was in place before? I mean, what level of automation was there, and how were people doing sourcing? Was it mainly by spreadsheet or sort of tribal knowledge amongst the group?
Probably that's a good segue. It's like it was mostly tribal knowledge, and when we did the reorg, the first thing we did was we let go a lot of people and we hired new people. And what we found out immediately after that is that we lost a lot of knowledge because everything was through emails and spreadsheets and data, and even though we saved some of the data, it was not at one consolidated place. So that's where e-sourcing is a good tool, because there is a forum there where you can track what changes or what question or what prompted this analysis. So I'm looking at contracts which was made 3 years ago, and I know it was logically it made sense at that point, but I can't clearly talk to who made the decision or why, because it's not recorded anywhere. So that's where moving from spreadsheet to a standard repository where you can go back and look at the data and make sense, it's a real boon to us where a lot of people are changing and there are a lot of turnovers and it's very dynamic field.
So that's great, thanks Asif. And you're in the airline industry that obviously has been hit by 9/11, hit by rising fuel costs. It's no mystery that you've got to drive sourcing savings. Hasn't always been the case in healthcare, Yogi, but those times they're a changing too, I understand.
Yep, they have, and they will continue to, if, you know, or when this new healthcare bill, the accountable care organizations actually come into play. We had a small company called Deloitte & Touche come in and take a look at our operations in 2009, and they looked at it and said, well, based on your spend, and you probably could save like $7 million about a, you know, medical surgical supplies are around like 40 million, in pharmaceuticals around 40, and then like 180 million in services and construction and facilities. And so we never had a strategic sourcing or procurement in place, but we did have good tools. We had spreadsheets. We actually created some good templates. We had scoring matrices, but it's all, everything was on, you know, in spreadsheets. And we started for the first time really getting to the RFP business. And if any of you have ever worked for a government or county, you have to be very transparent, and everything has got to be pretty fair. And anybody who worked or who lives in the state can say, hey, how did you know, Richard get it and this guy didn't? You know, prove to me. And so you have to be able to go stand in front of a judge and say, here's everything, it's all clean, it's all in the open. So we were saving everything, you know, we put it all and we were saving it into some, you know, shared drives, and it was, you know, become like, you know, you have 200 different sets of documents, and then you have 10 suppliers and you're doing a big professional service. Let's say you're doing a dialysis, which is like $4 billion spend, and you're trying to go get some new, you know, test the market, and you get back, you know, responses are like 50 pages per, you know, I don't want to use the word binder, sorry, in these, and then you
That's a recruiting.
I know, right? You don't want to use. I don't want to use that, right? So, you know, and it was very manual, and a lot of people I realized didn't really read the proposals. There's a lot of work. So they said, I like this one, or I like this one. How did you arrive at that? I know this guy, or I know that guy. So we said we need to get a little bit more automation. Now, when I did that, I had to put in a budget risk because I needed not only a tool, but I also needed a resource to manage it. And the way I sold it was, you know, I could reduce the cycle time. I could do more RFPs. I could do more than the $7 million savings if I get ABC. And, well, prove it. So we did a lean event. And we did a lean event. We did the value stream mapping and everything. And our, you know, our cycle time on a normal RFP average was like 240 business days, because this is not just buying products, but we're talking a lot about services. And my goal was that I could cut it down to, you know, by 100 days if I get ABC. So, you know, we got it. And we started implementing this February, I think, just the iSource part of Zycus. And I think we have got right now 4 or 5 RFPs going through it. We have completed about 5 RFIs, which is like really quick. And you know, basically encouraging the business users, the stakeholders, to go in the tool and score it properly so we can see, rather than, you know, having the hard copy and not doing anything. So that, you know, it's a lot more visibility and a lot more participation in exactly how we're selecting the supplier. So that was our, you know, our main purpose of getting into this. And anybody could go in and to run reports in the tool and say where are we at this point, or who said what, or what did the supplier say. You should get in the tool and do all of that stuff by yourself. So that's what drove it. And once we get really committed with the iSource, we probably move on to the iContract or Analyze as we move. We'll get more comfortable with it. So one of the challenges we have, I was explaining to you, so we already have Oracle, PeopleSoft, which has a contract manager module, and badly with IT, that, well, let's use this rather than this. It's going to take a while because they already paid for that, and but it's not the most robust software to manage, contracts or RFPs or things like that. So we got some selling to do to the C-suite.
So Wade, in your case as well, higher education, an industry or vertical where the premium hasn't always been on cost management, but certainly more in vogue now.
Exactly.
What drove your situation at Emory University for sourcing?
I think primarily it was really just the cycle time was very prohibitive. I think the whole process was really intimidating to a lot of people on campus or in different divisions. And Emory itself, we're relatively decentralized. We have central procurement, but each business unit has its own budget. They like to make their own decisions. They don't, particularly the IT side, they weren't as collaborative. And what we found is really when we started using the tool, we were able to really change the whole way that we work together around collaborating with RFIs and RFPs. We've done a lot of different ones in the technology area, some really, some large enterprise systems. We've done professional services, things like that. One of the things that we can do when we work with a team on campus, we can really just go to them and say, okay, we just need your functional and your technical requirements, and we're going to provide some boilerplate around some other events that we've done that are similar. And particularly as we've gone down that road with IT, we can get an RFP out in days. I mean, literally. And we used to have, once we would send out the RFP and then you wait for questions to come in and you provide answers. That was 8 weeks, and today it's about 2 weeks. So at any given moment, I have 5 out there right now that, and it's not stressing me out, actually. It's relatively manageable. And just having the e-forum as part of it, it allows all of the questions to be asked by the vendors in real time. We had a little bit of resistance, initially, just because, people like the stacks of paper and they like pretty charts and whose paper is heavier than someone else's. But we really found that, just to be able to, literally from the time the event closes, we can throw out results immediately and they can see a side-by-side comparison. What did people answer? And then when we get into the scoring part, we can really do some interesting stuff around weighting and putting emphasis on different sections and so forth. So it's really been very powerful around what we can do. We may be looking at a solution, and we're looking at maybe we figure one of the software vendors will do 70% of what we need. The other 30% is going to be covered by 2 or 3 niche players. We can throw it out, and the way that we structure it is we can grade them on different capability sets. And so side by side, we can say, okay, this is the best for 60%. We can tweak it a little bit and weight some of the other capability sets and see, well, who comes in as this, who will fill this space and who will fill that space. So you can get very granular. We can also do, we've done a lot of services, even our internal audit services we sent out through the tool. Even things that you wouldn't typically think of as lending themselves to electronic tools. Initially some of the vendors were a bit resistant. I think they don't like that salesmanship to be removed. They like to, talk to people and be, they like to pick up the phone and call. They don't like the e-forum and knowing that their question is going to be visible to all of the other people. However, it is, no one knows who asked the question, and we edit out any details that will give them away. But ultimately we found out from the vendors that do it, and we have a lot of vendors that have participated in at this point 10 or 15 different events. They really like it because they can take it, they can export it, they can send out different sections to different people. We've incorporated different sections, like we'll do with software. We have everything is a hosted solution. So we have our set of 100 questions that our security team put together that can go out with the RFP. They send that off to their security team. They send, vendor information goes to this person, functional, technical capabilities goes to someone else. So I think it makes it a lot easier for the vendors to actually be able to respond pretty quickly.
So Wade, when you talk about 75% cycle time reduction, really strong, robust adoption, both with your users and the suppliers. So anyone who's kind of been on the sidelines thinking about e-sourcing ought to say, well, I want to do exactly what you guys have done, or what Yogi and Asif has done as well. But I'm sure that there were challenges along the way for each of you. So just to throw it out to anyone who wants to jump in, what do you see as the adoption challenges, or what did you see as the adoption challenges initially, both in terms of internal users and stakeholders, as well as the supply base?
Yes. I think Wade touched on the major challenges, like resistance to change internally. Like anything, even if it's good or bad, it's like something which deviates from what currently people are used to. They first are apparent, so they probably have some doubts about it. So the compliance is our biggest user. Like when we initially rolled out the e-sourcing, for the first few months, the adoption rate was really not to a level we are happy with. So it was then we talked to all the buyers and the sourcing strat analysts who were doing it, and then we found out it's more like the initial setup time when you actually set up a RFP or a RFQ is longer than in a normal process. Because what Zycus or this e-sourcing tool forces you to do, it forces you to think about things which later on is going to be very helpful. So in a normal email RFP, you can just type something in paper and you send it across, and then you can re-edit it and do it. Whereas what we use the e-sourcing tool is make it more compliant. We had a standardized template, so people think about PCI compliance, people think about financial stability. So there are a lot more information you get from it. And once you set up the whole process, the next stages, when you do the analyzing and making addition, is much quicker, and the turnaround is the whole cycle time reduced. So that's more from the compliance side. From the supplier side, it's like I think Wade briefly touched upon, it's like the suppliers are not ready to give up any advantage they can have. So the moment I ask some question, I thought of the question, they think that I only deserve to know the answer. Our standard procurement process is set up such a way that it's fair to everybody. If somebody asks a question, even though they don't know, we consolidate all the question and we send out emails or send out the same answer to everybody. But it's more like a training. So we would have people calling up directly, and we would be like, why are you not putting up the e-forum? Because that's the standardized question. So it kind of helps the buyer to get away from what they're doing, because when you get a phone call, you pretty much have to stop everything you're doing and you have to go answer it in whatever the supplier wants at his pace. Whereas if it's standardized forum, you can go at the week or Friday and go look up all the questions, and there'll be so many repetitive questions that you have to answer it only once. So it's kind of helpful in the way. And it's an e-sourcing forum. It's very user-friendly, but still there are suppliers out there who probably are still faxing paper. So it is kind of training them as well. So how we go about is getting them all on a same call without knowing who the suppliers are. Just say supplier A, B, C, D. Have a training session or just walk through them the proposal. So it's more like just walking through the RFP, which section, what, and probably taking some questions. So based on all these things, and I think our usage over the years has improved a lot. We got to a point that we made it mandatory to use Zycus, unless otherwise there are cases where you have special exceptions. So you have to come and get a special exception if you don't want to use Zycus. So that's the change. And it's as Wade briefly touched on, people still like fancy printouts with all those pictures and stuff. The problem is half the things in RFP is stuff not useful, relevant stuff, which is more about companies' information stuff. So the way we went about it is we gave an option for suppliers still to add an executive summary if they want. so that they can still, they think that we gave them a fair chance to tell about the whole picture of the company. Because sometimes you just cannot make a decision based on purely cost, or you need to get the whole picture. So those are the few steps which we did to overcome the inherent resistance to change.
Sure. Yeah, and I can imagine that you look at, there comes a day when these things don't have to be mandated, certainly not for Generation Y. You know, so any of you are bringing new hires into the workforce, they expect to be able to multitask on an e-forum while they're doing a sourcing project. That's the way they interact today on text messages, right? So any other adoption challenges, either internally or with suppliers?
I don't think we had that many with suppliers, but one thing I'll give credit to Zycus for is the first couple of RFIs or RFPs we wanted to do were pretty complicated, you know, IT stuff, and there's a lot of, as you mentioned, you know, hundreds of IT and security questions. And I was on the phone with the folks at Zycus almost every day, and they actually helped us build our templates in Zycus. And the other thing that I had them do was we have our standard T's and C's templates, because unfortunately, when you're county, there's certain things you just can't, you know, these are must-haves.
Right.
You know,
non-negotiable.
Right. And so we had them. So if a respondent, a supplier, was going to redline, I wanted to redline as soon as they're going to tell me that they accept, or they will do the proposal, and they will, you know, the deadline is, you know, send it back by, you know, October 25th, whatever. If they redline the things that I can't negotiate, they're already eliminated from my process. I don't need to go through and, you know. So we had them build all of that, so it comes back a lot faster, and we know who we can move forward and who not. And then all those, if they can't interface with any of those things that we want, that must, like in the hospital business, you have to have your ERP has to interface with your electronic health records, and if they can't, we can't use you. So those things, and these guys probably are tired of me already, because I've been on the phone with them for almost 8 months, and we're still, you know, so I'm actually building for us something unique, but they're doing the work, not me. So
yeah, and so I hear you. Best practice is that it's not just a tool set, but it's not an empty vessel or container. You'll get adoption if it's configured with the right templates, the right categories that your folks can execute. Wade, any unique adoption challenges or best practices?
You know, I think, again, it was just getting that initial buy-in from IT. You know, there's just that intrinsic distrust of, you know, procurement is going to try and dictate to me what kind of solution to use, or they're going to try to tell me which vendor to use. And it was just kind of getting past that distrust. And I found, you know, when we really went through the scoring process, it is very transparent, and I think all of the IT people, particularly, you know, the IT people involved, really respected how they were able to really do the scoring, and they felt comfortable with the results. You know, those first few events, it was a little bit, you could just feel the, you know, what if the score isn't who I like? Does that mean I can't use them and all that stuff? And really, I haven't had one yet, maybe it'll happen, where we've really made a decision where the score didn't support what everyone's choice was. So, you know, and that is possible. I mean, we may have an internal candidate that we advantage, and you can set it up so that you can give, you know, one vendor an advantage over the other if they're an incumbent and they know us and we know them. You can certainly do that, but
yeah, you can do the preference. In our case, if the respondent is a business in the state of Minnesota, I could give them a 10% preference, because if I don't, maybe a congressman or a councilman would probably say, why did my brother-in-law get that business, or stuff like that. You know how it works. So,
yeah.
So does the optimism,
you could.
Does the what-if analysis or the scenario analysis, does it elongate your cycle at all? Does it add significant time? Or is it just as easy to compare different what-ifs to get maybe to a better result?
I think it's a lot faster using the what-if.
as he mentioned, as I said, the upfront work I think is important because once you get the business requirements from the users, and you break those down into the type of questions, whether it's going to be a text question or it's going to be a multiple choice, it's going to be a yes, no, but you make sure you capture the entire requirement properly. That's where you spend the time. But when you're getting the proposals back from the suppliers, it's like 1, 2, 3, you can score it. So it's a bit more upfront, but on the back end, I mean, you're talking months of reduction.
So I think folks would be curious, since this is working so well, how far have you rolled this out? How much of this, your total spend, are you able to address today, or how much do you envision being able to address through the e-sourcing process?
I think, like, just to give you a little history, US Airways has a decentralized purchasing as well. So we have technical purchasing, which takes care of aircrafting. We corporate purchasing, we are responsible for most of the indirect spend. So the compliance within corporate purchasing has been to a level we are satisfactory with. So our next term goal is probably to go and show technical purchasing to show vendor management, which is responsible for IT, so that they can all use the same tool, so that we can all start talking to each other. Because like once you have all the licenses, it's very easy to share templates and probably get best practices among each other. So that's our long-term goal. So probably, yeah, it's like
Right.
That's where we're heading.
So it's hard to say that there's a significant chunk of spend that's just sort of off limits to e-sourcing. It may be a matter of how you roll out different categories and waves. And Wade and Yogi, how much you spend are you addressing now through e-sourcing, and what's your vision?
Right now we started, I haven't done any, what I would call products, because we have the GPOs that I go through, all the medical, surgical stuff. But I've got right now 18 events going on, and they're all professional services for about $20 or $22 million.
And you're relatively calm as well. You
Yeah.
got 18 going on, Wade's got 5.
Yeah.
5 or 6.
Yeah.
But I have a resource managing,
Ah.
I have one resource dedicated to managing
Okay.
that tool.
Okay.
So,
And Wade, full spend coverage a goal or realistic goal, or?
I think, I don't know that we would ever get full spend, but really the IT spend actually, before anything goes in front of Ways and Means or our IT steering committee, it actually does have to be vetted now through this process. So the IT spend is pretty well locked down, just so that a real comparative analysis can be presented when they go to in front of steering. As far as other things, we've just started moving in construction, other types of projects. So I would see, there's a lot of different things that we could do. I think the most important thing for us is to be part of the conversation in the beginning. And that was not always the case. Sometimes we would get an order put through, here's the PO. The other challenge that we had too is that, when we would get a purchase order, it would have been, like for an IT purchase, we would take it and we would go out and try and get comparable bids. That was the best price. And really what was happening is, because we really were not in front of that part of the process, what the departments or what the divisions were doing, they were going out, they were going and picking their solution. They were working with the manufacturer. The manufacturer was choosing a reseller for them and then getting the price for them. So when we really started to get into the process, what we did is we said, okay, well, we're going to be in the RFI stages. We're going to ask all the vendors, or all the suppliers to leave us the option to quote to multiple places. In other words, they couldn't choose the reseller. We had the option to send it to 2 or 3 or 4 resellers. I think the first event like that we did was for Cisco equipment, and we found $120,000 range in prices. And all along they had just been basically handing over this one reseller, their best price, and they could squeeze in enough margin that they knew it would still be under our radar if we were testing the price. So we would say, oh, they got a really good deal, but they didn't get the best deal. So I think that went a long way towards them trusting us and letting us get sort of in front of it instead of at the end and reacting.
When it comes to e-sourcing and certainly the negotiation aspect, there are different techniques. It could be an ERFP, which more sort of emulates the traditional RFP, or it could be an e-auction. What are your strategies to determine when to use which technique for which categories? Have you, and what have you seen the relative mix be in your business model?
I think it's like we look at more like complexity and the spend volume or value. If it's a high value or a high spend or a highly complex, even though if it's a small spend, it has multiple business units, then we would always use an RFP because the cost is not the only consideration, because there are more parameters like customer service, consolidation, how you interact with them. So in those cases we use ERFP or RFP. We do a RFQ for products which we are relatively comfortable. It's a small one single product. It's a high volume or a high usage, but it's a very simple process, so we use RFQ. One thing once we had the e-sourcing, the ability it gave us, which we previously didn't have, is to conduct auctions. It's been a tremendous thing because previously we used to go to iteration after iteration to come to the price. Like every time we have a stage 1, they would give a price, and we'll go to stage 2, we'll shortlist, and the auction, what it does, like we try to combine auction with RFP, right, which is kind of gives good of both cases. We do a full RFP, we shortlist 3 suppliers who have the same capabilities, same specification, then the cost becomes the only parameter.
So you've normalized everything else, and now we can just focus on
price. And then we do a reverse auction where we can actually guarantee that we got the best price, because you always have a lingering doubt is like whether did I leave money on the table because did they agree too early to get your business. So the auction, reverse auction that time, it gives a lot of things. Also we have done cases where we are trying to do now RFP where we are doing reverse auction in the front just to narrow down the field, because it's a commodity where for print materials, like it's a very normal thing. We know what it is. So we don't have time and material to invest because it has an assessment period which is time consuming for both us and the supplier. Just to be fair to them, we are doing an auction to shortlist to 3 suppliers, and then we are going to spend effort to actually through the RFP process. So it's been a great help.
Saves you time on the back end.
Yeah.
And what would you say is a realistic recognizing there's variability between categories, but what's a representative kind of savings that on a per event basis that you're seeing with these sources?
The auctions are like the last one we did was like for plate lifters or like a product very similar to that. It's like we had like 80% cost savings. So previously when we did a simple RFQ would have had a price which is 80% higher than what we did. Just the pure competitiveness of the supplier base. When we did an auction, it was 80% reduction. RFP, we generally target 20 to 30% cost savings. There are cases which is on both sides of the equation.
Now I got to ask, can you guys beat 80%? It's going to be tough.
Not in my case, we have to be, the policy that we have is, we actually created a policy, so we're driving the entire organization to push everything through supply chain. We created, had it signed, the steering committee and everybody approved it. If this spend is over $50,000 annually, or $250,000 during the duration of the contract, if it's whatever, 2 years, 3 years, whatever, then it needs to go to supply chain to make the determination if we do an RFP, an RFI, an RFQ, or we just cut the PO or whatever. However, in the healthcare, you have to be careful. If it's software, even if it's $10, you have to make sure you go to, because you're dealing with license and all kinds of intellectual property. If it's patient care, anything that you can do that's going to touch the patient, whether it's a physician or nurse, a consultant, those have to be really, really, really properly done. So we would put those through the really rigorous process. If it's just trying to get price comparison for a guy who's doing the maintenance, we could just do an RFQ.
It's a commodity.
And if they don't know what they want, like I said, tell me why do you want this and what do you want? And said, I don't know. Then you do an RFI, because you're trying to help them gather the information so they can create the requirements. So we have used them. We have never done the e-auctions, but as I said, we only have right now only doing professional, so we haven't done any products as yet. But that is something that we may start using with the physician's preference items where you have multiple suppliers and we try to get the data to the physicians. So that may be something in the future that we could use.
Okay.
Yes, and I would agree with what they both said. Really, we've done the auction for telecom equipment and for real SKU-based things where there's some competitiveness in the marketplace. But for the most part, we tend to do the larger events. And it is actually the way that it works too. It's very easy to move from RFI to RFP to auction. Really, it's just a click of a button. You can have multiple rounds of RFI. If you miss some questions, go to RFP and then another round of RFP. So it is pretty flexible. So you can, or you could just jump right to auction if you want.
So we talked a lot about the various benefits that accrue to your organizations in terms of cost savings, cycle time reduction, efficiency. I'm just kind of curious about any benefits that you've seen to yourselves, to your organization's procurement overall. Does this help raise the visibility within the organization for procurement and the value that you deliver to the organization?
Definitely. It's like the first thing is like it increases the productivity of an employee. It's like you don't have to answer emails, you don't have to put spreadsheets, you don't have to do complicated calculations because ESOS already takes care of it. And then it's like it shortens the cycle time from a product to end product. So it brings more confidence for a business unit to come to you, because previously what used to take 8 months now roughly takes around 4 to 6 months, but still it's shorter, but you have a clear deadline because they can also go see in Zycus where it's currently at. And another important visibility it gives us is like previously we used to get a lot of responses and it was all in paper or soft copy, and we were responsible to consolidate and do a comparison and give it to them. Now it's just in a push of a button, you get a spreadsheet where each question you know what every supplier answered, and you can give it to the business unit and give the decision to them. I know we would take care of the cost and the negotiation part, but when it's your product, so when it comes to your product, who's the best player for you? So what we did was we integrated them part of the scorecard, which makes a final decision. So they get to a say in this, and they get a part of the ownership of the whole procurement process. So that increased the visibility as well.
Excellent. Okay. And I know we are short on time and have to wrap
Well,
up, but any final comments from you?
Instead of having 400 different documents on a shared drive, it's all in one place. That's a good thing. As you said, people can go in and look at it. Definitely the visibility and the reduced cycle times. And we're actually, it's now become company policy. If it's over $50,000, it needs to go through Zycus. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. So I think we're going to get compliance.
Excellent.
Yeah. And I would say overall, too, just as a collaboration tool, it's been really valuable. And we do have multiple teams that score the event, so if they're involved in it, they get a score at the end. And it is very helpful to have them part of the process. And they call us to do when they're ready to do RFPs.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank our panel for all the valuable input. I think now that you've heard their stories, the opportunity is to network and interact with these folks, at breaks, offline, and so on, because I think we just begun to scratch the surface about your experience and expertise that could help others who may be just looking at e-sourcing. And so I want to thank you all for your participation, all your insights. And with that, I think we have to send you off probably to your next session.